your thoughts and your beliefs are actually really imprinted on you by the age of 7. Right? Now that starts to become your subconscious. Whether you're 40 or 50 or 60, right? You still have these imprints in you and your DNA with how you're making decisions and how you're doing things. By the time you get generation 3, it's almost 90% of wealth is lost. One of the biggest reasons that people lose in that wealth transfer is actually it's not just about passing on the money itself, it's actually passing on values. Right? And things that matter.
Welcome to the Courageous Men Podcast, where we help Christian men follow God faithfully, love their families well, and build a legacy that lasts. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
Today on the Courageous Men Podcast, I'm joined by Dave Wolcott, a former Marine Corps captain turned entrepreneur, investor, and author of the Holistic Wealth Strategy. Dave has built businesses, he's helped countless families grow their wealth, and developed a blueprint for what he calls freedom beyond finances. So freedom of money, purpose, time, and relationships. But what I really appreciate about Dave's story is how he's built all of that while staying grounded as a husband and father of 4, including triplets. That's no small feat, that's for sure. This episode is for every man who's chasing success but doesn't want to lose what matters most. Dave's going to show us how to do that and build wealth around serving our mission and not the other way around. Dave, welcome to the show. Honored to connect with you again.
Whitney, it's always such a pleasure connecting. So grateful to be here.
It's great to have you here. And I know, obviously, we've connected before, known each other for a while now. And I know you've gone from serving as that Marine Corps captain to, leading your current investment firm to helping entrepreneurs build, what you call that holistic wealth. And, there's so many things I appreciate about your story. I think so much of it will resonate with listeners. But you seem to have been able to stay focused on, let's say, your purpose and relationships and some important, what I would call it, some of the most important things, while pursuing that freedom and success. And so I want to just dig into how you've done that so we can help the men who are listening to build that lasting wealth as well, but without losing what matters most. And so I want to dive in there.
100%, Whitney. It's certainly evolved, over the years, and I've felt a strong sense of, purpose and mission that, I got from probably really started in childhood. And then, of course, joining the Marine Corps, having the opportunity to serve my country and just work with some phenomenal people and really instill in you these values, right? Like values that are just so strong and really become guiding, principles in your life. But I love to really frame things in frameworks for people to help them really contextualize things and really take action. So for the listeners out there, one of the things that I've really discovered, and for you, a way to really think about what does wealth even really mean? What is holistic wealth? Well, it's very different to me than being rich. Rich is kind of what you see on Instagram, right? With the Lambo lifestyle and flashy things and right all of these toys, right? That make us want to go for that. And sadly, the younger generations are growing up with that, thinking that that's what success really means. As we grow older and wiser in life, we know that, toys only last really so far. So a great way to really think about this is that there's actually 6 forms of capital, Whitney, that you can acquire in life, right? And so we think about financial capital because, as Christian men, right, we want to be that patriarch to our family. We want to provide. And so financial capital is something that, we're really kind of striving for. What I've found in my journey is that there's these other forms of capital as well. You have intellectual capital, you have social capital, you have emotional capital, you have human capital. And all of these other things are really interesting because there were times in my life where I was interested in investing, I was interested in growing a business, yet I didn't have financial capital, right? So what did I do? I actually focused on building up my relationship capital, right? And starting to, build relationships that could take me to the next level, open up opportunities that I didn't even really think about having. Think about emotional capital. I mean, how many times do you have a conversation with someone where you really understand kind of what level they're playing the game? You know, are they always complaining? Are they always talking about things that they can't control, right? Or are they people on the other side of that, right, who are, serving others, right? And, becoming, they're resilient, right? And how they handle challenges, because that's, what happens in life, right? That's is the reality. So I think constantly building that, emotional capital. And then there's this intellectual capital piece. I often tell people, people always say, well, what's the best investment I could do? Well, really, the best investment that you can do that's going to have the highest ROI is actually investing in yourself, because it all starts with that, most important real estate, which is the real estate in between your ears, right? It's how you think about things, how you really see the world. And, we can see this played out in people like, it's very apparent when you see someone like Elon Musk and how he's operating and really solving like challenges that seem just beyond belief to us. And then you compare him to someone like who you went to maybe high school with, who's in the same town, the same set of friends, right? Or working at the same job, and they haven't really evolved much. And actually, it's interesting because if you've read Elon's book, it's really fascinating, the childhood beginnings that he came with. I mean, it was very tough environment for him and his family, how, in South Africa, and how he kind of, pushed really through that. But really developing that emotional capital is just so important. And again, investing in yourself, all these things with, there's so many great ways to do that these days, through educations, through masterminds, right? Through coaching and mentorship. And these are things that, weren't readily available for us, back in the day, Whitney. And I think, one of the challenges that a lot of us struggle with, and probably why it took me really so long to, discover all these things and put it together, is because, when I was raised, right, money was really taboo. Right. We didn't really talk about money in the household. We had a middle class family, but we were very, there was a big scarcity mindset in our family. Right. We didn't really talk about these things. We didn't really talk about having a growth mindset.
There was always worry and struggle tied to money in my house growing up. It
Yeah.
was always a major burden.
100%. Right. Now I see it so clearly. Right. Back then, in your earlier self, you can only see like with one pair of glasses. Right. But the more you really evolve yourself, you could see things you've never even seen. And you can see people around you who just don't get it. Right. Because they're playing the game at a different level and they haven't really evolved.
There's so many things there. My goodness, I love how early on you were talking about how just the challenges that come about and how people are, how they handle those. I mean, it says a lot, right? How resilient they are, and thinking about who you're around and all that. And I know you talk about how that your time in the military, right, in the Marines just is foundational for you. I think similar to me in a lot of ways. My time in Iraq, I think back to that obviously often and think, whatever situation I'm in now is not as bad as that. But the Lord has used that amongst many other hardships to push me and to grow me and to teach me things, and is still doing that in a massive way. And to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and thank you for this hardship, because I know that you're like helping me, helping me to improve. You're helping me to do better. You're helping me, in so many ways. I was recently listening to, I saw John Maxwell in person, and he's writing a new book, and it's The Return on Failure is the name of it. And one thing he talked about was, he said, like, everything is hard. Like, it's just uphill. Like, anything that's worth doing, right, is uphill, and you don't coast to success. And so, I think about that and some of those foundational things that you're talking about. As you think about some of the foundational things that happen even as a child that you're talking about now, or military, how do some of those things, or maybe some of those things you've had to alter your thinking on that's helped you to lead in your business or your family, today?
Yeah, great question. And I think the real breakthrough in thinking is to understand that, these challenges that are presented to us are really the raw material for your goals. So when you can embrace those challenges that come your way and that seem, sometimes so overwhelming, how are you going to get through this? This is actually how you get to the next level and how you really work through that. Tony Robbins even talks about that, right? His cause is so strong for feeding the homeless because he wasn't fed, right, as a child. He didn't always know he was going to have food on the table when he grew up. So at the time as a child, he really regretted that from his mom and like, wow, this is crazy. But that's what's driving him to, now feed like billions of people on the planet, which is such an amazing cause. But when I think back, we did my parents, we really had this kind of scarcity type mindset. We weren't poor by any means, and I thought we were successful. But there were constantly things that, my kids laugh at me today and they're still ingrained in me, like, everything from turning off the lights, right? All the time to leaving food on your plate table. I mean, to this day, I have a challenge going to a buffet style thing because I have to eat every morsel, that's on my plate, or it'd be wasteful because there are starving children in Africa, right? So there were all these things and these little sayings, money doesn't grow on trees, right? All of these things that, start to permeate you. And it's also fascinating that most people don't realize that all of this, your thoughts and your beliefs are actually really imprinted on you by the age of 7, right? So those things kind of settle
That's
in
scary as a
place.
parent right there.
Isn't that really scary? So, I mean, who can even remember when they're 7, right? But now that starts to become your subconscious. And today, whether you're 40 or 50 or 60, right, you still have these imprints in you and your DNA with how you're making decisions and how you're doing things. So if you came from that environment where it was scarcity, it was challenging, right? You're going to be seeing the world in a different way, right? You're going to be playing defense instead of offense. You're going to be living in scarcity versus abundance. So one of the biggest, afflictions that I kind of worked through was just, my mother just had a very strong, authoritative kind of presence, right? Which probably led me really into the Marine Corps in a way. So I'm really grateful for her because I developed such a strong sense of responsibility, a strong sense of values, and all those things. But as I do, deep work on myself and really understand things, it was actually some of this, like, just feeling basically controlled that I'm seeking now freedom, right? I'm seeking a huge sense of freedom, and that's what drives me so much. So it's taken me many years to really kind of figure all of that out and make that connection. And I believe that, most people have some sense of there's like in their childhood, there's usually two of the biggest things that people are challenged with. It's like trust and control kind of issues, right? So once you can make that connection and then see, how are you making decisions today, right? Subconsciously, in your business, in your life, in your relationships, and those kinds of things, it's quite enlightening.
What was the pivot moment for you that it was like you were able to shift from, say, chasing success, right, to really thinking more like, hey, I want to create this holistic freedom? Like, what was that change, that pivot in you?
Yeah, great question. I think we live in a world of ever increasing grind culture, right? And it's never enough. And then back then, I mean, the same thing. I mean, in the Marine Corps, I mean, it was 24/7, all consuming. And then it wasn't enough to just be in the Marines. I had to be a Marine officer. Also in there was a whole pecking order as well. Like I got into infantry, and then that wasn't good enough. So then I had to get into recon, which was a completely elite unit. in and of itself, which people were operating at just an amazing level. And then you find this in entrepreneurship as well, right? Is that people have lifestyle businesses, which is great. And then there's people, creating 9-figure businesses and, having, really big purposes. So I think really that, to go through that migration, was there a really pivotal event? I think there was probably a few, right, that kind of came along the way, and it was a little bit more evolutionary. But I definitely came from that hustle and grind culture. And I left the Marine Corps, I got into corporate America, and it was the same thing, right? Where it's people would sacrifice a relationship with a client or a partner for those quarterly results. It doesn't matter that you just spent 2 years kind of building a relationship or sacrificing your values. We had to get the quarterly numbers in place. And that really disgruntled me. That was dissonant with who I am. And so I felt like corporate was really like a machine. I also felt the same sense from Wall Street, right? I really learned over time that, like, why should I'm working so hard for my family's future, and then I'm just giving everything to Wall Street, which is just a machine. And these guys don't really know any better. It goes up, it goes down. There's absolutely no control. Maybe you make 7%, and then you start to figure out you pay taxes, fees, and inflation, and maybe you're making 4%. I mean, it's complete handcuffs, and things like 401ks, right? They're golden handcuffs for you to, stay with the company and then not access your money until 59 and a half. But to answer your question, long-winded, context there. But I think there were a few moments. I think I took the purple pill and read, Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Cash Flow Quadrant was extremely enlightening for me to really figure out that I could move to the business side of the quadrant, create a business system that could operate and be an asset for me. That was really compelling. Becoming an investor where I could generate capital that didn't require me to be there. So not being in this time and effort economy, but really having mailbox money kind of come in while I was sleeping. And so until you actually figure out how to do that, you're always going to be trading your time for money, or working under someone else's system. But you need to create your own system so that it's working for you. And I think, frankly, this is what a lot of our holistic wealth strategy and our thinking is really about. And I know for you as well, in passive investing, is okay, not only are we getting into less risky assets, better producing assets, but it's also about like kind of creating some sovereignty in your life, right? And understanding that I feel more abundant because my family's future is taken care of, because I'm investing in things that make a difference for people, right? I'm investing in, say, an apartment building where you're providing housing for people. And by the way, you're partnering with the government. You're getting tax breaks, not because it's a loophole. That's where the government wants you to invest. So you're actually partnering with them versus just putting it in the stock market, which is just, like putting it on the craps table.
Yeah, I would love for us to be able to dive into some of the investing pieces at some point. But before we do that, or I don't know if we'll have time this episode or not, but I want to dive into what I would say is a little more important, but is the husband, the father component. While you have been building a business and been pushing in all these directions, like you're talking about, obviously you're very driven. I can relate to that. You're talking about the things in the military. It's like, oh, that wasn't enough. I had to go do this and I had to go do that. And, then you get in corporate America and then, on and on. But your husband, you're a father of 4, including triplets, which is such an undertaking, to say the least, right? How have you managed to maybe stay present, right, at home while leading, in a big way? All right. Whether it's in business or, I don't know the stage in which you were at as far as a parent when you were in the military and then entrepreneur and those things. But how have you managed to be present at home while being this driven? I just think so many entrepreneurs, men that are listening, can relate to that.
Yeah, I think it's all about creating an intentional life for yourself, right? And having a strong vision about, what are the next 3 years, the next 10 years really look for you? What is the quality of your relationships? What does your health look like, right? What does your income look like? What does your freedom look like? How much time do you take off, right? All of these different things. So when you have a really strong vision, you can actually break through different walls, right? Or barriers that kind of, come your way. And so for me, one of those grounding visions has always been, like I said, investing in yourself is so important. So there's been times where maybe, okay, I know I could have, worked a few more hours in a week, right? Or things like that. But I intentionally never compromised my exercise, my practices, my morning practice. I call it my morning success routine, which seems to be getting longer and longer every day, but is actually the most valuable part of my day, where I have, today, I got to ride my bike in like that thinking time. Like I do a lot of cycling, so the thinking time is so powerful, and being intentional about what I want, right? So getting that exercise in, being healthy is really good. Journaling, meditation is absolutely huge. So you can stop all of these thoughts of other people, right? Kind of taking over and telling you what to do. And then you're being intentional about, you know what? These are the three most important things I need to get done today, or this week. And what comes out of that is, in terms of being a spouse, of being, and it's actually part of my vision statement is that I want to be a world-class father, a husband, a brother, a son, right? A friend, right? To all of those people in my lives and like those relationships that I have. So I think about that because it is part of my vision statement. So how can I be world class? Like actually just this weekend, I hadn't talked to my brother in a little while, and we jumped on a video call, and it was great. We got to connect for like an hour and just really spend that time. So even if you can't be with someone because the distance is too far and everything, you can connect, you can reach out in multiple ways, and then different things, during, when the triplets were born. I mean, obviously it was completely chaotic, right? And we got through things because we had to, and there was no other choice. And I was so grateful that they were healthy. There was a point where one of them, my son Oliver, was actually, he was on an incubator for like an extra like 2 weeks because he wasn't breathing. And it was really touch and go whether he was going to even make it. And now I just got to see him graduate infantry training. He actually just went through the Marine Corps himself. It's just so amazing. We have this bond now that's like, it's amazing. Only someone like you could appreciate that, Whitney, or anyone else who's been in the military, have done something like that. What a special bond. And it's even reinforced the bond I have with my dad because he was in the Air Force and he served his country. So when you can kind of create these deeper connections and more meaningful things with those relationships that you care about, wow, it's really powerful. And the other thing I'll share that I think's, pretty cool for people to just really think about is like, sometimes we always think, we're too busy. Like we wear that on our sleeve like a badge of honor. I'm too busy, Yeah, how are you? I'm busy is the first thing we answer, right? Or you might say like, hey, I don't have enough money, right? We don't have enough money. But those are all mindset issues. You're not busy. You have the same 24 hours that Elon Musk does in a day, right? So if you want to spend time with your son or your daughter or your spouse, you can do it, right? It's all just about how you are intentional, with your time. And funny enough, I find a lot of the things around money, a lot of us, we come up with ideas in our own head, like I can't, we can't do that because I can't take a week off of work and, go see some friends or family, or we can't really go on this vacation. But if you change that whole mindset, I mean, half of the time it's actually not even about money. Again, it's really intentionality and how you think about things. And time off should be something that's celebrated. That's a part of you, how you can actually grow as a person and then reconnect and create those unforgettable experiences with people around you.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about the relationship you and your son have now, and it's such a neat story, though. By the way, from his birth now, getting to see that, man, what an honor, a proud moment, dad moment, right? That's so cool. And now, you hear people talk about those relationships that are built in the trenches, right, or in the foxholes, and it's neat. You and your son now both are understanding more and more of that together, right, and having those
Yeah.
discussions. And I have relationships that it was a 20-year anniversary beginning of this, actually this year, when I was in Iraq, and I
Wow.
got together with my squad earlier this year, and a number of them I hadn't talked to since we came home. Some of them I have stayed in touch with, and but there's just this instant bond, right? There's this instant. I mean, every one of them that comes up, I'm just giving them a big hug. It's like as soon as I see them, right? We just experienced hard things together. That just created a relationship, lifelong relationship. And but something that made me think of is, as we're talking about these hardships and these things, as the father and man leads their family through these hard things, is oftentimes, I know this is the way it was done in my family, especially just in different men I've heard about as they've grown up. Those things aren't talked about, right, as a family. And I feel like, as in our family, I'm trying to be more and more open about hardships, and just talking through those things as a family, just to a level that everybody can understand, or anything that's happening, because one, I want them to know how to navigate just their mindset, right, around when hardships happen, right. I want to be able to train them and teach them. But there's also, like, kind of like you're talking about in the trenches, there's relationships that are built, right, around even those hardships. And so when my 10 and 12-year-old sons can know, hey, things I'm struggling with right now, and they're praying for me, and they're seeing dad struggle, but they're seeing dad, work through it, and my mindset about all this, and it opens doors for us to have more conversations about it. And as they're growing up, that everything wasn't just always perfect for dad. No, he had to push, he had to grow, he had to, all these things. And so I was thinking about, as a man's leading in their home, it's so similar it can be to being in those foxholes, right? As well. But on that thinking as well, I wonder, like, for you, is there maybe rhythms or other boundaries? And I want to talk about your morning routine a little bit again in a moment. But any other rhythms and boundaries that you all had in your home that helped you to just lead well, even when there's chaos?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, again, kind of coming from my background, where, topics like, yeah, struggles or money, like, wasn't brought up as much. And there was not, that environment that fostered, like, hey, how can I help? Or, let's kind of be in this together. And, there's a sobering statistic that actually, only after second generation of wealth builders, like, up to 80% of wealth is actually lost. And then by the time you get generation three, it's almost 90% of wealth is lost. And one of the biggest reasons that people lose in that wealth transfer is actually because it's not just about passing on the money itself, it's actually passing on values, right? And things that matter. So we have made it a point in our family. We actually have a family constitution. We do an annual family retreat,
Love
where we
that.
get together and we actually talk about values. We talk about money too, right? We talk about these topics that no one wants to talk about. And it was really cool. I'll tell you, it was really fun because, again, most people, and this kind of comes into that intellectual capital piece or emotional capital piece, is that a lot of people are just, whatever, if they just invest in the stock market, they just, like, outsource things, right? But all of these things are connected, right? Right? Because the wealth creates energy for you, right? That's going to amplify things in your life, right? And whether that's serving, at an even bigger cause, or, or living in a more abundant life, right? I mean, it creates a massive amount of energy. So I used to do these things, like in high school. It gets increasingly harder to connect with the kids. They're all going their different ways. You have a big family, right? The kids are, like, all over the place. But we would have these little, I call them, like, mini masterminds. And it was so great, right? Because you kind of try to transition yourself into this, like, coach like person. Because, of course, if you tell the kids anything, they're not going to want to listen, right? But if you can very subtly kind of like coach something or give some kind of real world example of, hey, I'm working through this, what do you think? Or kind of just bringing them into the discussion, right? It becomes, so much more powerful. And like another really good example is, part of our vision was, we wanted to, connect with my wife's roots in Italy. We'd always loved the place, and we ended up buying a place over there. And we've been fortunate enough to go for 13 years in a row. We've actually bought multiple places. So we've been taking our kids to Italy for 13 years, which is an amazing chance to get them to experience a different culture, a different language, right? How do people kind of do things differently? But the approach that we did was we bought the apartment and then made it an investment property, and then the whole family was involved in it. So I can tell you, we have memories today, Whitney, of like getting on the train with backpacks full of paint cans and and tools and brushes, like going through IKEA and trying to figure things out for the first time. But all the kids had a hand in beautifying the place and kind of making it their own, and connecting with the culture. And then as kind of part of our wealth transfer, we want to pass on the property to our kids, and so that they have it as an investment property, and then they can kind of like continue that tradition. So I think there's some pretty cool ways that you can get kids involved at different ages with putting your values together, and you work like on a real project like that, and then it becomes really tangible.
That's such a good example. A mentor of mine, is always, we think through like different areas of our life. Obviously, like you talk about often that you want to focus on, but he talks often about getting twofers or threefers, where you can like combine these things to improve in a few of these areas at the same time, or different areas you're focusing in. But I love that one because, it's a major connection for your wife, right? And her heritage and her family. And I mean, that's what a connection for her, and loving her in that way that, the whole family's like in this thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even that time spent there. And now for generations to come, potentially there's still that connection, right? From her family, for her lineage there. So I love that. And then the having to figure it all out together. You talked about getting on the train with backpacks of paint or whatever. Like that's precious, right? But I love the investment there, right? Like not just in Italy, but like in your kids going through that process, right? And I think so often I could just think, okay, what's the return on my investment if I buy this piece of real estate here? Like that could be I could just have the blinders on and be thinking about that. And while we do need to think about that, but still, I feel like it's a much bigger investment, even much bigger return on having your family involved and their time invested there together in a project like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I've just seen now my 27-year-old daughter, our oldest, she's now living in her third house already, right? And she's done two rentals like since then, right? So I think, these kids really will learn these lessons, when they're, young enough. You can kind of teach them these lessons, and it really, instills great things in them. So, every chance you can, try to get that in, because by the time they hit high school, it's so hard to just get their attention, and now we're in the stage that they're in their 20s. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we get them involved with things, right? Like, how can we connect them? How can we get them to want to come back, right?
Yeah, that's why most people put a pool in.
Yeah, well, actually, I can give you a good example. So we literally just we just moved into a new house, and I can tell you it's been a 3-year journey, Whitney. So part of our vision was to actually we wanted to build a custom house here in Florida, and really make it a destination place so that all the kids and the grandkids would want to come here. And so we got some toys, and we live near the beach, and we have all of this fun stuff. And now we're anticipating a great Thanksgiving, because everyone's coming, everyone's excited to come. Great weather, lots of things to do, lots of ways to connect and everything. But it was it's trying to take your environment, and Ben Hardy talks about this, which is great. Like willpower doesn't work, right? How can you take your environment, right, and 10x your environment so you can live, you can come from that, right, and really kind of magnify yourself from your environment, and then also just make it really meaningful, right, with family, and that the things that you do, and we have lots of health and wellness things, like kind of have a wellness center built in and all these kind of things, so it really kind of supports our lifestyle.
I want to get to just a couple quick things here before we run out of time. But you mentioned your morning routine, and I think maybe I've even heard you talk about that, just how it shapes your mindset. I think, and I could not agree more. And maybe just quickly, walk us through that a little bit, and just what that discipline, start to your day looks like, and maybe how that impacts you as a leader and husband and father. I would like for the men listening to be able to think through, hey, your morning tomorrow, after they're listening to this, what can we learn from Dave here, and to even implement tomorrow? Maybe not, we may not be able to implement all of it right away, right? But hey, what are some action steps, that you take in every morning that they could take tomorrow?
I'm going to go through step by step, Whitney, and this is actually one of the most important takeaways. If you don't have a morning routine in place, you're going to be reactionary to someone else's plan. But when you can own your morning, you own the day, right? It's that simple. Now, mine is extreme, so take out of it what you want, but you don't really have to do that. You can do what's relevant really to you. But basically, I wake up, I pound like 20 ounces of electrolyte water is the first thing I do to get my system going, get my adenosine to kind of rise on its own versus just grabbing a coffee. And I sit by myself wherever I am. I actually really like to go outside, even whatever time of year it is, wherever. And I work through gratitude. The first 15 minutes is a complete gratitude practice about everything I am grateful for. And when you can work through that, then that eliminates any negative thoughts coming through your mind, like, hey, I'm tired, I got 2 hours of sleep because of the baby last night, or I'm totally ramped up at work, I got no time, any of these kind of things, you let that go, right? That's my initial part. I love espresso. It's one of my favorite passions. So I enjoy kind of a espresso from there. And then I work out. Coming from the Marine Corps, right? It's kind of part of my DNA. Cycling's really big for me. So usually kind of cycling or weight training or swimming, or I do some yoga as well. So do some kind of working out. But then after that, take a little bit of time to stretch, and then always really meditate. I meditate on a PEMF mat, which is a grounding mat. So anytime, I love to do stacks and biohacking type things. So if you're meditating, well, get on a grounding mat. It's amazing. You'll just find your body, it like completely relaxes. And then what I do from there is like I'll have a great smoothie. Is really my breakfast thing. So now I get some good nutrition. I've gotten hydration. I'm treating my body and my mind like a temple. And then I pick up my journal. And I say, like, these are the three most important things I have to get done today. I'm aligned to my goals, where I'm heading. I'm completely in charge with, what I want to do for the day, right? And then I start my day, and my day is completely power packed with, the things that I want to schedule and that kind of move forward from my life. Now, the last thing I'd like to add to this is that one of the things I've kind of really learned, especially in the past couple of years, and I'm working on, is we always talk about morning routines, but let's talk about evening routine, because your morning routine really starts in the evening. That's actually when it really starts. First of all, are you not going to bed at the same time every day? That's an issue. I get up at 5 as well, right, to get things going. But I always go to bed the same time every day. Probably like 9:30. I'm in bed, like out. I read before bed. I stretch. I use a foam roller to get rid of like any tension in the body. Sometimes I'll take a hot shower, a sauna, or a hot tub. Anything you can will help your body actually cool itself down to an optimal temperature to try to really get ideal sleep performance, that night. No electronics too. I mean, I'm not texting I'm off all devices by like 7 o'clock. Nothing like that. So when you can have a really structured evening like that, you get super quality sleep. You're on fire to own the day the next day.
Love that. Even that you went back to the evening before, I could not agree more. The more my wife and I have really been in unity about like, hey, we got to get in bed by this time every night because we know we value the morning so much. Like we value that time, especially with little kids too. It's like it's the only time before everybody's up and going, right? That couple hours together in the morning were similar. Some of the similar things that you're doing. But yes, if we don't get in bed early enough the night before, man, we pay for it, right? The next morning, and then we pay for it that entire day. To say the least. That's incredible. Is that something you and your wife do together? Like as far as is she that way as well? Like, hey, I want to be in bed about a certain time, up early. Or is that something you all have found that's good to do together? Or you've been able to have different views on that?
She's a little bit more free flowing, which I attribute, but we're still roughly in the same thing, in the same kind of timing. And we always have a chance we walk the dog in the morning and at night. That's one of our great connections, gives us a chance to get outside and kind of connect since we don't have kids with us now. But we're generally on the same program. So yeah.
That's awesome. I just wondered, I've had different guys mention that. Okay, Dave, last thing, if you could issue one challenge to the men listening, like something they could put into practice this week, what would it be?
That's a great question. We've covered so many, good topics. So why don't we leave it with this, right? And we're at the end of the year here, right? We've got probably a little bit less than 2 months left to really make some things happen, maybe 50 days or by the time this airs, right? So why don't we say, Whitney, what could be the one single biggest thing that you could do to make 2025 your biggest year ever?
So nailing that down this week.
Nailing it down and doing it.
It's good.
Just one thing.
Yeah.
And that could be morning routine. That could be signing up for that mastermind you've been thinking about. It could be anything.
Dave, so grateful to have you on the show. I love I'm really big on discipline as well. Obviously, you are so structured, and I love hearing how other men are disciplined and structured, and because it's a choice, right? It's a choice that you're making every time to do those things. That, hey, this leads to one direction, this leads to another, right? Something as simple as staying up late or not, right? Or getting up on time, or all those things. And so I love learning from men like yourself who have even done that and managed through chaos or triplets even, or, managing a business and growing and all those things. So thank you so much for how you've done that and just shared with us today, and so many lessons that we can take and implement today and even tomorrow. How can the listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Appreciate that, Whitney. And I guess just to add on to that first is, I appreciate you as well. And I think the energy that you bring is fantastic. The world needs it, right? So keep doing what you're doing. And thank you for your service as well. It's going to be Veterans Day next week. So I appreciate you, brother, and the sacrifices you and many others have made out there. Freedom isn't free. Right. And we need to be grateful for that. So appreciate you and those who have served as well. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been it's always great to connect. If people enjoyed that might like my book, which is, you can get a free copy. I wanted to give a free copy to your listeners. You could go to holisticwealthstrategy.com.